So here's what's in your neck of the woods. Everybody's been sending me stuff. A lot of people have been sending me things. Okay, so on with the mushrooms. So let me shrink this down a little bit. So first one here is a little white mushroom sent in by Renee. Flip it over. It kind of has some classic signs. You've got your ring on the stem. You've got that kind of pinkish hue happening on the gills. This is going to tell me Agaricus. That club-shaped stem is a little out of character for some of the campestris you find. So I just kind of put Agaricus species. There's so many different species. This is a virtual ID thing, and it's pictures, and it's hard to get all the identifying features. And now there are a lot of good edible Agaricus. I don't see any staining on this. If you were to see any kind of yellow staining, or if you give it a smell, you would smell a kind of chemical. They say phenolic, but you may not even know what that means. It's basically kind of a chemically smell. Then those could be toxic and upset your stomach. So anyway, that's an Agaricus. Our next one submitted by Renee. I think we saw one of these last month. You can't really tell by looking at it, but that's most likely some sort of conifer wood. And when you flip it over, you see the scurfy stalk, and I zoomed in on those gills there, and you can see they're actually serrated. This is the mushroom known as the train wrecker, and as I mentioned, it's pretty much always found on conifer wood. They call it that because it'll eat oh geez, what are those things called that they build the railroad tracks out of? The pylons or whatever, and it'll tear those up, and then your track goes all funky. So anyway, that's Neolentinus lepidus. Our next one here, also submitted by Renee. You may have seen these. These are fairly common. One of the Inky Cat mushrooms. That photo on the left's a bit blurry, but you can see it's got dark spores. You can also see down here, this is the mushroom starting to deliquesce, so the spores are maturing, it's releasing enzymes, it kind of turns to goo and drips the spores around instead of having them blow in the wind. This is Coprinus variegata. So this one's submitted by Jesse, found in North Bethesda. Now they thought this may be like a boletus edulis. Well, I told him it is a bolete, but it's not edulis. So you'll notice that it's kind of got this pink hue. It kind of can go kind of a purpley color. This is typical of Tylopolis, which is another genus of boletes. They told me that it was actually quite tasty, and so I'm assuming it's not bitter. And I'm not the best at boletes, so I kind of went through the books and I put a name of Tylopolis Indecisis on this. That's tentative. I think that may be what it is, but it's something along those lines. Our next one, I hope that you know, also submitted by Renee. You'll kind of see that there's a greenish hue to those gills. Big, nice looking mushroom, ring on the stem. A lot of times your stem's going to be getting dark colorations like that. This is Chlorophyllum molybdites, green spored Leptoid. This is the most common mushroom implicated in poisonings in our area. I think in North America, actually. It won't kill you. I guess if you had some sort of underlying thing, but typically it won't kill you. You'll just wish you were dead because you'll be coming out of both ends. So you don't want to be eating this one. Good one to know. And maybe this looks a little familiar to you. This one was found in Mount Eagle Park in Alexandria by Joanne Tang. Now I've got this slide on the right offline. It's a stock photo, because I wanted you to see how similar they can look. This is actually also on the left a Chlorophyllum molybdites, green spored Leptoid, to make you very sick. Mushroom here on the right is Macroleptoida procera. It is a good, tasty, edible mushroom, that you want to make sure you're not mixing these two up. A simple spore print would clear things up. This one, the one on the right, the parasol, tends to have a darker stem, kind of like a pattern on it. Tends to be a little furrier on top usually. This umbo, the little bump, the little nipple looking thing on the top is pretty classic for that, but you can kind of see that sometimes in chlorophyllum. So these are, if you're gonna want to eat parasols, make sure you know chlorophyllum or at least get spore prints. All right, another mushroom submitted by Douglas Miller, Cromwell Valley Park in July. So you might be able to guess what this one is. It's a little green russula. A little closer picture you can see, so it doesn't have that quilt pattern on the top. So it's not virescens. Good shot of the gills. You can actually see, which is in the description, that it actually can have these forking gills right near the stem. And if you look close, there are quite a few forked gills up there near the stem. Calling this one the grass green russula, Russula aeruginosa. They say all the green russulas are edible, except for the one that smells like dead deer. So I've never seen that mushroom, but anyway, it is what it is. Whoops, okay. Another one by Douglas Miller. This is Halibut State Park in Massachusetts. Really nondescript little orange things growing over there in the grass. When you get up closer, you got these white gills, orange cap, very distinct radial lines on the cap cuticle there. Usually when I see that, I immediately think it's one of the fetid group russulas. There's quite a few in there. Some of them smell really nice. Some of them don't smell so nice. Some of them will smell nice when they're young, and as they get older, they'll have like the sickliness on it. But a lot of times they'll smell kind of almondy or benzaldehyde with like a weird underlying rot in there. I don't know. They're interesting mushrooms and pretty common. I put the name Potentula on this one just because the darker orange. So it's supposed to have like a darker oranger cap. You know, not having the mushroom. These are all tentative. So anyway, it's certainly one of the fetid group russulas. Okay, so this one's submitted by Carrie Raditz under Oak and Beech. So you might be able to tell this is some sort of Redbolotis. It's got that pretty distinct dark red stipe. There's a little bit of bluing reaction here on the pores. This mushroom's a little bit older. So this is also tentative ID. I'm saying this might be a Biorangia bicolor or Boletus bicolor. They tend to have a much thinner pore layer than this does. But as the mushroom matures, sometimes that pore layer gets thicker and thicker. And so when it's young, you'll have a very thin pore layer that shouldn't stain very much. You know, again, we're going by pictures. So anyway, that's possibly a bicolor bolete. There's a few in there that are lookalikes that can be very similar, and you have to pay attention. Apparently some will make people sick, and some, the boletus bicolor itself is delicious. So it's something you need to work out if you want to try and eat boletus bicolor. This looks kind of similar. It's got that dark red stipe, kind of yellow at the top, the orangey red cap. But if you look close at the pores, they're not so much yellow or turning olive. They have a orangey reddish color to them. There are some general rules of boletes. One of them is if it has an orange or red pore layer, don't eat it. Also, if it stains blue, that can rule out some good ones, but you can see this dark blackish blue staining. I'm not sure how quick it happened, but this is not boletus bicolor. There is a similar one to bicolor that has a red pore layer called Borealis, but I don't think that this is what that one was. I put Neoboletus luridiformis on there. Again, tentative. I'm not sure if that's exactly correct or not, but it's good to see that how similar looking mushrooms can be actually quite different. Okay, well, we got another one. Submitted by Douglas Miller. This was under Oak and Beach. I wonder if I didn't change that. Okay. This one doesn't have quite as dark red a stipe. You can see it's got this very thin pore layer like I was describing a minute ago. This is your more what you would expect that your younger boletus bicolor to look like. I believe it has that slightly changing blue. It's not something like a Simsibilis or Pseudosimsibilis. They tend to have a more rapid, darker bluing reaction. I put bicolor on this one as well. Again, I may be wrong, but that may be what it is. Here is, wow, what do you know? A slime mold. There you go, Lamont. And it's the dog vomit or scrambled egg slime. This is submitted by Carrie. Pretty big cluster of it there. You might get a good taste out of that. This is Fuliga septica. Pretty common. And okay, here's a wonky little knob glob at the base of an oak tree. I initially thought Onia tends to be found with conifers. So I just kind of threw on a, maybe it's an Indecisis. This one I wasn't sure of. I actually almost sent this to some people. Oh, I keep forgetting that when I hit the button, it advances. Okay. So anyway, there's not much to describe this. It's more of a glob. It looks like it had a fuzzy surface. I'm not even sure if there's a pore layer, but anyway, it's a scop, some kind of polypore. So this is, I'm trying to move the, sorry guys, I'm trying to move the little video from my screen because it keeps getting in my way. And so I'm clicking and I'm advancing the slides. So this is submitted by Chrissy Perry. This was found in beech, oak, and poplar woods. Some of you guys might recognize it pretty quick. And if we got this other picture, you can see there's some brown stains on the gills. There's even looks like some little white droplets. That's the latex still, still there. There's some more latex dripping out of the gills over here. This is Lactarius volimus. I'm pretty sure that's what this one is. Carugas tend to have a darker, more wrinkled cap. Hygrophoroides tends to have a much wider spaced gills. Another good feature is you can see that the stipe on this is about the same color as the cap. When this latex drips out, it can be, like the name says, volimus. It can be a lot of it. And if you get it on yourself, it's super sticky and it makes your hands all sticky. I actually have an old basket that I had one of these and it dripped on. And from years ago, it still has the brown stains from where the latex dripped down and oxidized on the basket. All right, so this one's submitted by Chrissy, found in Annapolis. This is a bizarre little guy. So it looks like it's growing from wood, but I don't think that's what's happening here. I believe this is a mushroom being attacked by a mold, so it's being hypomicized. This exudate, this weird resin droplets that are happening, I'm completely speculating here, but it could be that the mushroom being attacked by the mold is trying to send out some sort of compounds to combat this infection. And so maybe this exudate contains compounds that's trying to fight the mushroom. Like I said, I'm speculating, but I haven't seen this happen. Usually when you find something like this, by the way, I believe it's Philoporus, one of the gilled boletes. Usually you find it's almost completely covered in white. So I haven't seen it with these little resin drops. It's kind of cool. All right, this is a cute little guy, submitted by Priscilla, found in West Virginia in spruce forest. You may be able to tell quickly, it looks bolete-like, and you would be correct. It has pores. Just for future reference, if you're gonna send a bolete pictures to me, a lot of times it's very helpful to get a knife, especially if you have more than one mushroom, or one and you cut a piece. But if you cut into the flesh, if you were to cut this mushroom down the center, you might see some other staining reactions happening either in the cap flesh or the stem. I'm thinking there might have been a slight bluish gray coloration here. I was calling this one the bay bolete, Boletus batius. So here's a mushroom submitted by April Thompson. She sent these in 2 different emails, and I saw this orange one on the left and was like, maybe a xanthoconium or something, I don't know. And then she said, this is actually the underside of that cluster. And you can see very clearly, I should have blown up and put a little picture of this reticulation on the stem. So there's like a web type pattern that can happen on some boletes. And this one is pretty, it has a pretty distinct web-like pattern. It tends to be quite yellow. Sometimes it has some greenish tones. But this is Redbolotis boletus ornatopes, the ornate bolete, ornate stalk bolete, something along those lines. It's fairly common in our area. Some people say it's good. Every time I've nibbled on it, it's been bitter. So I've never tried that. So here is a cluster of cute little white mushrooms submitted by Fred. These are the 2 pictures I put here. So these are leptoid mushrooms, so they look like little Lepiota type. If you guys know what Agaricus americanus is, it kind of looks like that. And so could be a Agaricus. Supestapes tends to have powdery scales on the top. But I decided to go with possibly, Lepiota cristata. Sorry about that. Okay. Yeah, Lepiota cristata for this one, because it looked, when I was looking at closer at the cap scales, they looked more regular scales and not very powdery. But it's little features like that that can help you distinguish things. Now, I asked him if it had any kind of aroma, but he said he didn't smell it. So. Okay, here's a cute little mushroom. Very small, submitted by Estella. Easy to overlook, but it's very distinct in that it has these little, very distinct radial lines. Now, there's mushrooms that are very similar to this. I went with Parasola because of the brown spot in the center. If you were to look closer at these, they wouldn't have had a universal veil, so they wouldn't have a powdery coating on them either, where something similar like Coprinus or Coprinopsis disseminatus tends to start off as with a universal veil, and it leaves kind of remnants on the cap. But it has those radial lines, very similar to that. So these were submitted by Michelle Goldsmith. I think a lot of you guys might be able to pick that one out. It is very common, found growing on wood, and it's one of the coral mushrooms that grow, one of the only that grow on wood. The pictures weren't good enough. I tried to look online for some better pictures to zoom in, but this is the crown-tipped coral. So this is Artemisides pixedatus. It is an edible. They say if it gets kind of brown staining on it, it can get kind of bitter. I've never found it in great abundance, so I've never really tried it. It's a cool little mushroom, though. She had also sent in a few separate mushrooms, which I thought were pretty cool, so I threw them in here as well. I'm calling this little bolete over here the Campestris cluster. You can't get very far with images, and there's like Boletus fraternus and Campestris, and there's these little small red-capped, yellow pored, blue staining or not, little boletes, and there's lots of them. It's hard to give you something distinct with just images. This over here is the lantern stinger on the lizard's claw. It's really cool looking. You've probably seen stinky squid or maybe one of the other, the white stinkhorns with the green goop on the top. Well, this is very similar, except the gleba is at the top of the column there, inside the little arms. And this is where the flies would go land, get it on themselves, and fly off and spread the spores. I have not seen that one actually in the wild, so that's kind of cool. These, I believe, were Pycnoporus cinnabarinus. They're like a cool little orange polypore. Actually, they might have put them in Trametes now, but anyway, they're one of your little colorful polypores. This is submitted by Matt. This one's great with its like little white fibrils all over the stem there. You can see them really well. Very distinct. This is Tetrapi nigripes. There's a marasmiellus that's similar to this, except it has a much more cross-veining gill structure, hymeneum, and I believe it grows more on twigs and leaves, or maybe twigs, whereas this one's more on larger branches, I believe. He also found himself Sporacis. I put Herbstii on here. This is the cauliflower mushroom that's associated with oak. Sporacis crispa tends to be more frilly, and it doesn't have the zonation on the lobes. The lobes seem to be pretty uniform. I believe this is a Amanita cochrae. It tends to have spiny warts. It's usually whiter than this, so I'm not too sure. But it is one of the Lepidella amanitas, which are usually white, a lot of times powdery, usually have weird smells, whether it's chlorine or ham or socks or things of that nature. And this cool little guy over here, which is a little Mycena, but is blue. So I believe that's Mycena subcerulea. Matt also found a big old log just full of summer oysters. And so he said there was like at least like 1,000 caps just all over the place. And so he had a whole bunch of pictures. I threw a few in there. Probably Pleurotus pulmonarius. This was submitted by Tom. This was, I guess, his garden or his folks' garden or somebody, but that's a whole lot of, that's a big flush of mushrooms right there. If you look closer, it's similar to the parasola I was just showing you. It's got these dark coloration on the gills, and it's cuprinoid, so it's what they call the non-inky Coprinus, because this one doesn't deliquesce. You saw the variegata earlier, and that one will just turn to goo and drip. This one doesn't do that. It actually uses wind for dispersal of the spores. And if you look close, there is a little cluster of the wolf's milk slime growing right there, and a close-up.
Hey, Mitch, if I could just interject real quick.
Absolutely.
We just submitted a few mushrooms last year for the Mycoflora project, and I think that may be the same Coprinus that was sequenced, and it was just sort of confirmed on our iNaturalist account, which is Mycoflora. So if y'all want to go check that out, they labeled it as Coprinus or Coprinopsis lagopus. For what that's
Lagopus? That one's usually like real furry when it's young.
Right, I thought it was a strange, I thought it was a strange thing, but it looks just like this, what I found. But that's what they labeled it as with the DNA, so, yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Jared. And Tom also had some pictures, which I guess he took. Actually, Tom, if you want to talk about these, there's actually 3 different lichens growing right in the same cluster. He had some other pictures. I just thought since this had all 3 of them right up in there, I figured I would just put the one large image so you can see all of them up close. Okay, you wanted to say something, Tom?
Sure. I'm riding out the quarantine at my parents' place in central Pennsylvania. And the other day, whenever I was on a hike, I saw this fetching little cluster of 3 different Cladonia species of lichens on top of a fence post. So I got out the macro photography lens and decided to take a picture of it. Even if I didn't tell you I was in central Pennsylvania, if you know anything about lichens, you would realize that I wasn't in the DC metro area. Lichens are especially sensitive to air pollution. Lichens get basically all of their nutrition through the atmosphere. And since they don't have a waxy cuticle like plants do, basically they are very sensitive or sensitive to changes in atmospheric chemistry. Around the DC area, the main contaminant is going to be sulfur dioxide, which the lichens will absorb, and that messes with the algae that's part of this physiological association between a fungi and an algae, and will prohibit it from photosynthesizing. So in short, you would never find 3 fruticose lichens like this, 3-dimensional lichens, all growing handily together around DC. You gotta get away from the city to see this. So on the left, you have the iconic British soldier lichen. This is on the front cover of at least one of my lichen books. The red part on the top is the sexual fruiting structure. This is the apothecia, and you can see it just kind of spills down over the side. Right next to it is the powderhorn lichen, Cladonia conocorea, and in this case, that powdery stuff along the side is little pre-made packages of both a algae and fungal hyphae. They're wrapped together in tight little balls. So you see that powdery stuff on the side. Whenever a bug happens to crawl past that, or maybe a bird lands on it or something, one of those little pieces of dust will if everything works right, get caught up into that that bug or that bird, and get transferred to a new location where both of those organisms, both the algae and the fungus, can grow together, and little pre-made asexual reproduction strategy. The coolest one, or my favorite, is the ladder lichen. And if you look closely, you can see that the stalk, the cup-like stalk, that's called a podetia, is they keep growing out of the center, one right on top of the other. And in this case, you have an asexual fruiting structure right along the rim of the edge of it. And they look like little black pebbles that are pasted to the side. And that is an asexual structure that's called a pycnidia, and it produces asexual spores. So anyhow, that's everything. Thanks, Mitch.
Well, that's it for me too. Thanks for everybody. These are a few pictures that John Harper had submitted. He had put in a bunch, and I just kind of threw in a few of his. They're really cool mushrooms. I really like Hortonii, the Hemilixinum, and it's like really wrinkly cap. Very cool. Nice image of this Amanita parsivolvata. So you'll see lots of orange and red Amanitas around. I like this picture because if this was something like Flavoconia or something along those lines, you would see that it still has a partial veil covering the gills. But this is quite young, and there's no partial veil. Lots of different pictures of the Daedalea, Corsina, and what might be, Lixinum albellum. He had called it Lixinum scabrum, which it may be, but I tend to call albellum or Polypus, but they usually can be whiter than this, but they tend to have that crinkly cap, kind of like that Hortonii over in the left. Anyway, thanks everybody. I'll send an email update so that you have the suggested way to submit photos. I'll send that out again, and you'll probably see some sort of virtual foray notice where we can do this, except we'll have we can all talk and kind of go through the mushrooms, and just it would all be just talking about the mushrooms that you found in your area. And you can send me the pictures. But anyway, you can look for that email, and I'll have more details there. Thanks.